Hi everyone, today I want to show you how to knit this super simple corner to corner garter stitch baby blanket. It's perfect for those mindless knits in the evening because there is only one type of increase, one type of decrease, and the rest is all knit stitch, and there is virtually zero counting going on. So it's great when you just want to knit something and you don't want to have to use your brain too much. I made this blanket as a rectangle, it's baby sized. I've got a written pattern on my blog if you want to recreate this exactly, and I used Papeteer Batik shade 55412, and I used only 2 balls for a 60 by 80 centimeter blanket, so it's really not a yarn hungry project at all. You're going to want any weight of yarn, whichever you prefer, and you're going to want some circular needles that are long enough to accommodate the length of the diagonal of your blanket to make sure that they're not too short. I'm going to show you how to make a rectangle because I like a rectangular blanket, but I will also talk you through how you can make it square if squares are more your cup of tea. So without further ado, grab your needles, grab your yarn, and let's get knitting. To get started, we want to cast on some stitches, and the best part about a corner to corner project like this one is that because you're starting from one corner, you only need to cast on 4 stitches. I like to use the long tail cast on, and I like to start my cast on with a slip knot. I find it just makes that first cast on stitch a little bit more secure and less likely to get too tight on us. So you want to cast on 4 stitches. Don't forget that this one does count as a stitch. Then you want to turn your work and you want to knit all 4 of those stitches. Then for row 2, you want to knit 1 stitch, and the next stitch is our increase stitch, and that is a knit front back. It's literally, you pick up your stitch as if to knit it, you pull up your loop as if you were knitting it, but you don't let this stitch drop off your needles yet. You want to pop your needle round into the back of the stitch like this, pull up a second loop through, and that is your knit front back. So you are knitting the front and the back of the stitch to create an extra stitch that we have here. And then you want to knit the remaining 2 stitches. Don't forget to turn your work after every row. This next row is what will become our repeat row. So you want to knit the first 2 stitches, the third stitch you want to knit front back increase. So you want to knit front and then knit through the back to create your increase, and then you want to knit the remaining stitches. I'll show you again. Knit the first 2, and your third stitch is a knit front back. It's more fiddly when the project is really tiny. Once you get further into the project, it's quite easy to work that increase, and then you knit the remaining stitches. One more time, knit the first 2 stitches, knit front back for the third one, so pull up your loop through the front as normal, go back into the back of the stitch and pull up your second loop, and that increases it for you, and then knit the remaining stitches. and what you'll notice is each row increases your stitch count by 1 stitch, and it starts to grow this lovely triangular shape. And it's all that same repeat: knit 2, knit front back, knit the remaining stitches. And because we are making a rectangle, we want to work this increase row until this triangular portion here has an edge that is as long as you want your short edge of your rectangle to be. Or if you're making a square, you want to increase it until it's as wide as you want your blanket to be if it's going to be square. For us, it's a rectangle, so you want to increase to the point that you have a nice triangle and it is as wide as you want the short side of your project to be. And then we can head on to work the middle section, which is what gives us our rectangular shape. I went away and I made this increase section a little bit bigger for you so you can see the effect that it starts to create. The way you work your increases creates this lovely inbuilt border, which I absolutely love about this project. And it's literally just working that same increase row over and over again, and your blanket will naturally grow. I just want to show you that knit front back once more now that the project's a bit bigger. So you knit the first 2, you go in to knit the front of the stitch like that, go round the back and pop your needle in to the back of the stitch while still keeping it on your left hand needle, and you pull up a second loop and then drop the stitch off, and you have increased your stitch by knitting into the front and the back of the stitch. And then you want to knit all the way along to the end. So we are now going to imagine that our project is as wide as we want it to be, and you'd be measuring along here, you wouldn't be measuring diagonally. So this is as wide as we want the short edge of our rectangle to be, or if you're doing square, it's how wide you want your project to be. If you are doing a square, you want to skip this chapter for the middle section stitches that we're going to work, and you want to head straight to the bit where we decrease at both ends. But for those of you that want to do a rectangle, we now need to stop this getting any wider at this end, so we want to decrease at this end, but we still want to increase at this end, so you want to still work your increases at this end of your project and not at this end of the project. So it's a 2-row repeat for the middle section of our rectangular project. Our decrease row is worked as follows. So you want to still knit the first 2 stitches, that doesn't change. But because we don't want this blanket to grow any more in width, we are going to knit these 2 stitches together to decrease by 1 stitch. And knit 2 together is literally what it says on the tin. You take 2 stitches, you knit them together as if you were knitting 1 stitch. And then you want to knit to the end of your row. If you are new to working a rectangular project, you might want to mark this end so that you know, at least for the first few rows, that it's the end that you're decreasing on. it is fairly easily recognizable once you've done a few, because it's quite obviously a straight edge. But if you are new, or you're likely to put your work down and walk away from it, and you don't want to have to hunt to see which end is your decrease end, you can pop a little stitch marker, and then you know that that is the end that you need to work your decreases on. This end is going to be the long edge of our rectangle, so we still want to carry on making this longer. So we still need to work increases at the beginning of this edge row. So for this row, it's the same as we've been working our stitches in the increase section of the blanket. So you still want to do your knit 2, knit front back, and then knit the rest of your stitches. So knit 2, knit front, knit back, and then knit to the end of the row. And our stitch marker will remind us that this next row is a decrease row. So we want to knit 2, knit 2 together. Completely normally, you're just taking 2 stitches at once and knitting them together, and then knit all the way to the end of the row. So then again at this end we want to work our increase row, because we want to make this edge longer, and you want to repeat these 2 rows until your long edge of your blanket is as long as you want it to be. So for the blanket that I showed you in the intro, I made my short edge 60 centimeters and I made my long edge 80 centimeters. The beauty of this project is there is no set row count. You can just knit away until you are happy with the project size, and then you start to decrease. You want to make sure that you are obviously ending on the end of a decrease row. So when we're going to move to the next section, you want to be starting your row here at a point where you would have increased, but we'll tackle that bit next. So go away, make your project as big as you want it to be, and then join me back for the final third of our project to show what we're going to do to pull this all into a nice neat rectangle and to finish off our project. You can see here that I've gone and decreased at this end for quite a few rows to give you a good view of what happens to the project. So you can see that this width edge here has not got any wider because we've worked decreases at this end, and you can see that this long edge has now reached a point where, you know, I'm ready to bring the rectangle down to a point, and I don't want my long edge to get any longer. You want to make sure that you have just finished a decrease row and you're ending at your needles being at the long edge of your project. And really the decrease section is just repeating the decrease row over and over again until you reach a point that you only have 4 stitches left. Just to recap that decrease row for you, you want to knit 2, knit 2 together like we have been doing at the other end, and knit the remaining stitches. And instead of decreasing at one end and increasing at the other end, we are going to decrease at the beginning of every row from now on in. At this point you don't need your marker anymore because we're going to be decreasing at both ends. You could remove your marker to remind yourself that you're decreasing at each beginning of each row. And with this part we carry on as we have been doing since we stopped increasing. We are going to work on knit 2, knit 2 together, and then knit all of those remaining stitches. And you want to work that lovely easy 1 row repeat right down until you have 4 stitches left on your needles. And at that point I'm going to show you how we finish off our project, we cast off our work, and we have that lovely corner to corner rectangular garter stitch blanket. So I'm going to go now and I will finish off decreasing down until I've got 4 stitches left, and then I'll show you that final finishing stage of our project so that we can get all of our ends tidied up and sorted out. I'm just working my final row now, so I've got knit 2, knit 2 together, and then I have 1 last stitch left to knit. And once you get to this point and you have just 4 stitches left, your rectangle should be pretty obvious by now. Sometimes it needs just a little bit of a stretch out because it curls. It doesn't curl while you're working, but it scrunches up. So there you can see we have a nice rectangle with a built-in edge, and then we've got these lovely diagonal stripes of corner to corner garter stitch. Now we want to cast off, and my preferred way to cast off this blanket is to knit the first 2 stitches, then pass the first stitch over the second stitch like that. Knit 1 more, pass the first stitch over the second stitch, knit the last stitch, pass the first stitch over the second stitch like that. And then when you have 1 stitch left, you want to cut your yarn, pull through, and there you have your corner to corner rectangle all finished. And then what you would do is sew in your ends, and that's project finished. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, please give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments, and I will be back for another tutorial again soon. Bye!